I am Erin Patton, metaphysical master in a millennial age, and it is my life's purpose to guide you and organizations along an enlightened path. So I invite you to sit comfortably and tune in as I welcome you to the Meta Business Millennial, where we get the real conversations you won't get in the boardroom so that we understand this is exactly the path we need to be on in order to grow, evolve, and thrive. Greetings, I am Erin Patton, also known as Master L, and welcome to the Meta Business Millennial Podcast. Today, I am joined by none other than my friend, I consider it might be my friend, and also brilliant podcast host for PS We Expire, a podcast about grief and loss, Miss Morgan. So welcome, Morgan, to our show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Erin.
Yes, I am so happy to have you here and also to have the opportunity to talk with you and share your story. We've had so many beautiful conversations over the course of months. We actually met through this organization called the Human Gathering. And my first connection was with you. And so we just talked about everything from our lives to our families and connected so deeply. We were like, okay, we got to keep this conversation going, first of all. And second of all, we both have podcasts. So let's just share in a way where other people can also tune in, tap in, and get turned on to who we are and what we have to bring to humanity. So I guess without further ado, I'd love to kind of dive into, the why of why you created this podcast, We Expire. Obviously you've shared a little bit with me. However, I'd love for you to get into a little bit more about your journey of loss and gains and how that inspired kind of where you are today.
Yeah, so the podcast was kind of born of this frustration that I had of being on social media and only being able to share some of the most powerful, life-changing lessons and tips, and not tricks necessarily, but these insights that had really powerfully affected me and changed my life in really positive ways. I got tired of not being able to share those in longer form. So I was like, doing these reels that are 90 seconds and these stories that are not very long. And I just thought I really want people to be able to hear these tools in their full glory so that they can be applied in really powerful ways. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where the podcast stemmed from, was just wanting to have these longer, deeper conversations with people. And the title came about because so much of what my life is shaped by is an understanding of how short our lives are. And
Yeah.
many people go through life really not looking their own mortality full in the face. It's really
hmm
scary to think about the fact that at some point, everything that we have worked for will not be here anymore, or
Yeah.
nobody's going to remember our names. I mean, like, that stirs up a lot of stuff. But I have found that turning my gaze towards my own mortality and understanding just the small part that I have to play in on this timeline has
hmm
brought so much clarity and joy to my own life, as I have stopped ignoring the fact that we're all going to be out of here sooner than later, and we
Yeah.
kind of view death as this, like, don't talk about it, kind of push it to the side, just keep plugging away, keep moving forward. And then suddenly we, get smacked in the face with something that's really difficult, really hard, or someone that we love gets sick and dies. And then we have suddenly death is before us, and we wonder, what am I doing with my life? So
hmm
that is the kind of like the birth story of the podcast and why I talk about what I do.
Mhm. That's beautiful. And for you, you've had this personal experience with having, lost your child and really having to navigate the emotional lived experience of the loss and having this kind of, I would say, short existence here on this planet.
Mm.
And for those and I think when we met, I shared with you that when I was 6 years old, my sister was unexpectedly murdered by her girlfriend. And My
Mm,
mother was a grieving mother. I was raised by a grieving mother, essentially. And it kind of came back around as adults when I lost my father, and she kind of
mm,
fell back into that grief again, and in many ways has transformed into a whole different being because of those experiences. And for me, being able to kind of name that as grief wasn't something that I could easily do, but or even had the awareness to do, because it was just a way of existing, just like always feeling like your heart was ripped open, and always feeling
mm,
like you're vulnerable, and always feeling abandoned in a sense. And really want to dig into kind of your story of loss, because I think it's very inspiring, and also, obviously informs a lot of who you are today.
mm. When my daughter Annie was 3, so she's my oldest of 3 children. When she
Hmm.
was 3, we through a series of, I mean, I wouldn't say unfortunate events, I would say fortunate. I'm so grateful that we got her diagnosis as early as we did. When she was 3.5, we were told that she had this incurable genetic disease that we weren't going to be able to do anything about other than symptom management, and that she was going to die as a mid-teen. That was the average life expectancy. The most that we could hope for really was like maybe early 20s. And that was with a lot of other things that would have been in her favor, acting in her favor. So, we had 11 years of really working through what it means to have a child that's going to die, and she passed away in December of 2022. So even though her death was expected in a lot of ways, it still was fast and it was a surprise. A big part of this journey for me was understanding that there was going to be an after, that
Mhm.
there was going to be a time after she died. And so I started to ask a lot of questions about my identity as a mother, my
Mhm.
role as a mother, what was I going to have after she passes away? I thought a lot about that. And so I started to adopt behaviors and adopt a mindset and have a lot of really positive perspective shifts that happened before the fact, because I knew that was coming. And I knew that as much as there wasn't going to be a lot that I could control in how it happened, I knew that I was going to have to take care of myself in a different way on the other side of her death. And so that really did make me dig into a lot of these big questions that we tend to shy away from and not ask ourselves, because again, it was just staring me in the face. I started to ask a lot of big questions about all of those things. And also, having 2 other children that needed me, that needed me to learn how to navigate my own grief so that I could show them that it was okay for them to navigate theirs, was
Yes.
really important. And I had
Mhm.
heard so many stories of families where a loved one dies, whether it's, a parent or a sibling or even a grandparent, and the families just don't talk about it. And
Yeah.
these kids are left wondering, like, what happened? How
Yes.
do I process everything that's happening
Yes.
to me? Because nobody's talking about it. And it can be a really jarring thing for children to have their reality shifted in such a big way, and have them wondering, like, is anybody else seeing this? Why isn't anybody
Mm.
talking about this? And so I
Yeah.
really committed to having these conversations with my children about how I was doing and how I was navigating things, and how sad I was that Annie isn't here anymore.
Mhm.
Talking about things like, it's really difficult for me when I'm out and about and I see this thing. Oh, it makes me think of Annie and I wish she was with us. So it really has, I think, given my children the gift too of being okay with talking about hard things, being okay with talking about the grief, and being okay with talking about how sad they are, how mad they are, because I'm
Mhm.
modeling that to them. And I think that makes me feel really good about like what I believe my job as a parent is
Mhm.
not just to navigate my own stuff, but to teach my children also then how to navigate their own emotions when it comes to things big or small.
Yes, and the key to that is just what you said, is in the modeling.
Mhm.
Because how many times have our parents told us how we should be or told us how what we should be doing, but they weren't able to even model it themselves. So there's no way we could even embody that. And
Mm.
so for you, it's just really inspiring because I was of that group of folks where after my sister Erica passed away, we never mentioned her name again. Like I just recently started
Mm.
to talk her name since I started this podcast, ironically,
Mm.
in an effort to just say her name in the healing of that, long season of my life where almost she just her existence it was erased. And understanding too that you have this beautiful ability to name those emotions, to name that sadness. I mean, it was only just a few months ago, and my condolences are still with you and your family because for me, especially in losing my father a few years ago, it's taken me years to really
Mm.
accept all the things that have come with it. And and I feel like that's more of a testament to our how we're taught how to deal. And so, for example, when I mentioned before him, I was angry when he
Mm.
passed away because I felt like he left me. And for me, that just showed a very immature aspect of my being, an aspect of my being that was still very childlike in its thinking and its processing, that this man could have a choice if he could live or not,
Mm.
really. And by him leaving, and this was his calling to go at that point in time, that yet still it felt like an abandonment. And
Mm.
so I love this sort of this modeling that you're doing. And if you don't mind sharing some of these emotions that you navigate and how you actually what are some of the tools you use to really deal with them, especially as it relates to the parenting aspect
Mm.
of the grief?
Yeah, well, I think the worst thing that we can do is just ignore them perpetually,
Yeah.
ignore how they're
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Um, there I think many people are probably aware of the 5 stages of grief that have been outlined by Kubler-Ross, the anger, denial, the acceptance, the I can't remember what the other ones are, but
Hmm.
the interesting thing that I learned about grief was that this is not a linear process. I'm
Hmm.
like, I can't be like, oh, sweet, I'm through step 1, on to step 2. And when I get to
Yeah.
step 5, then I'm done and I've done the work and I'm through it now. The way that she developed this model and this understanding of grief was that it's very fluid, it's very flexible, and that
Mhm.
you move through the stages not in any particular order, and you frequently will come back to things that you have already worked through. And so it's not
Mhm.
so much a prescription of how to move through grief. It's really just a way to name the internal landscape of
Yes.
how we're responding to our circumstances. And so
Mhm.
I too have felt that anger well up. It's Mine hasn't been so much on like being mad that Annie left. And the parent to child relationship, has a different kind of tenor to it than it does with
Yeah.
a parent when an abandonment feeling. But I definitely still feel angry that she's not here. There are many days when I feel relieved, which, before I would have felt very hesitant to talk about because
Mhm.
the thought is like, what kind of mother is relieved when their child dies? But
Right.
it's a different kind of feeling to it when it's a long terminal illness, when there's
Right.
so much worry wrapped up in how is this going to go, what is her death going to be like, when is this going to happen? And when
Yeah.
she died, it was this space in my mind that was constantly dedicated to that worry, was
Mm.
suddenly evaporated, and there
Mhm.
was relief there.
Mhm.
And I wish every day that she was still here. So
Mm.
the grief, I think, the and this doesn't just apply to grief, this applies to all the things that we feel as complex human beings, is
Exactly.
that we are really frequently in a state of paradox where we have to figure out how to hold space for the both and. So I
Yes.
feel both that I wish that desperately she was with me, and a relief that she's not anymore. And I
Mhm.
have to let myself feel the tension between both things. it's really, we get ourselves into trouble when there is a part of me that says that I shouldn't feel relieved. And so I push that down, push
Yeah.
it down, and I bury it
Yeah.
and I stuff it and I don't talk about it and I don't acknowledge it. To me, that's like, if with my child they were telling me how they felt and I told them, you don't feel like that, or you shouldn't feel like that,
Yeah.
we can hear how damaging and dismissive that is as a parent. Yet we do that same thing to ourselves all the time. We
Yeah.
tell ourselves, you shouldn't feel that, you shouldn't feel as hurt as you do about what that person said about you, you shouldn't feel as happy as you do about, getting something that you've been working for a long time. We
Mhm.
just make ourselves shut ourselves down and stuff these things and refuse to look at them because there's a lot of shame with that. And as soon
Yeah.
as we can just unshame ourselves from feeling whatever we're feeling, there's so much relief in that. There's so
Yes.
much relief in that.
Yes, 100% agree because a lot of what this emotional expression journey is about releasing that shame. Because, and I'm so grateful that you felt safe enough to express your true emotions around the loss and that there's a relief. And I totally understand that relief because, I mean, if you were spending all of your time, this energy in an anxious mind, in a worried mind, and then now that worry is gone, then of course that would be the sensation that you would
Mm,
experience. And and to feel shameful around that is absolutely understandable
mm,
as well, because of course, like this is my child. I'm supposed to be doing everything I can to keep them alive. And it's like,
mm,
are you not though? You
mm,
know, didn't you do that? Didn't you do everything that you could? Because at
mm,
some point, and this is what I've been understanding along my mother journey, is that there is a lot that I can't control around my child that I get blamed for because I've also shared with you, I've had a lot of challenges with my son's father, a lot of blame placed on me for a condition that he inherited that I had no control over. And I did my best to nurture him in that state, yet I got blamed for it. And so that blame lived with me for a long time up until fairly recently when I was really able to accept and see that I did my very best in caring for
mm,
my child, and how that reflects. We're going to court over it. We're going back to court over it is, going to be up to the court to decide. However, at the end of the day, I'm comfortable with myself and secure with myself because I know that what I did was definitely in, the highest interest for my child.
mm,
And so for me, I really, can really understand what you're going through. And, I'm doing my best to really kind of navigate this idea of shame, if you will, and understanding that I will not be able to do anything, um, to really help nurture kind of, I'm doing everything that I can to nurture that feeling, if you
mm,
will. So the shame is certainly an aspect that is in many ways a shared experience.
mm,
And it takes me back to what I always share with my clients and on my podcast is the map of consciousness. And so the map of consciousness was created by Dr. David Hawkins in the 70s. Are you familiar with it?
no, please tell me.
Oh, okay. Because I actually have the ability to share my screen. So I'm just gonna share my screen right now so everyone can kind of see um what it looks like because it's much more easily explained by visually. Oh, it's so awesome. Okay, so this is a map of consciousness. So this actually was created by Dr. David Hawkins in the 70s, and it actually is a logarithmic scale of how logarithmic numerical scale of how our consciousness aligns to our view of God, our view of our lives, the emotions that we express, and the process through which we, engage with with the world around us. And 85% of the world lives below this dotted line. And where I lived for much of my life, especially coming into knowing of this scale, was in the guilt and shame column. So even the incident that I experienced with my son, in many ways, I feel like my being attracted it because this was a vibration that I was very comfortable in, a vibration that, really resonated with me, thinking back to even my own experiences with loss and with motherhood and how likely my mom felt so ashamed of, having, and she had expressed this to me, how she felt like she didn't do well with her first two kids. And
Mm,
she really was trying her hardest with me. And there was a lot of just, unworthiness that she carried that I inherited in a sense. And as I started to heal those aspects of myself and heal those aspects of myself with my son, I noticed even for my own being, my consciousness, rising, my emotions shifting. And, this is exactly how it looks. So, for example, someone who's like a genius, like an Albert Einstein would live at the love frequency, the 500 at this 500 level. Someone like a Mahatma Gandhi would be like at the enlightenment level. So he's able to really kind of stave off like the British, empire. So that's kind of like the map of consciousness that I think about in terms of like where we exist and our emotions. And so the shame really resonates with me in that way.
Hmm.
Hmm.
The interesting thing about, I in various ways have seen the maps of consciousness outside of that, and I will share that I've gotten myself into trouble when I would be at these like higher vibration states and then would feel the anger, the shame, or the sadness. And the interesting thing was like then I had shame about feeling shame because I
Yeah.
thought, man, I'm not
Yeah.
like high vibe right now,
Yes.
and what has been most helpful to me has been the allowing of, like I talked about with like the 5 stages of grief. It's the allowing of trusting that, there are always going to be things that come up that
Mhm.
we are like, whoa, I didn't know that was there. I didn't know that I still had some work to do in this area. I didn't know
Yes.
that this circumstance was going to poke something in me that I hadn't looked at yet, I hadn't addressed yet. And it doesn't mean that we're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that we haven't put forth enough effort to be kind of up in those higher vibe states all the time. It doesn't mean anything about that. From my perspective, the we can get ourselves into trouble when we try to bypass all of those, all of those hard things that come up and just kind of like put ourselves in this faux higher vibration state where we're like, I'm
Yes.
fine, like nothing can touch me.
Yes.
When really what
Mhm.
we feel internally is like, I can see that there are things that I'm not addressing because I feel like I shouldn't. And,
Yes.
some of mine stems back to the way that I was raised up in an evangelical Christian home, was
Mhm.
this promise of heaven, promise of perfection
Mhm.
that really made me stunt my lived experience now. So when
Yes.
I was dealing with everything that was happening with Annie, and I was watching her mind and her body be affected by this disease, and I would have people tell me, in heaven, she's going to be perfect. In heaven, she's going to be able to run and jump and laugh and talk with you. All of the things that I desperately wanted to do with her that I couldn't because of her disease.
Mhm.
And I understand I really do understand the comfort that that brings. And also that made it almost made me like try to skip over how hard it was that she couldn't do those things now. And it was like, I think many people were not comfortable in just sitting with the fact that, yeah, this disease was damaging her brain and damaging her body and
Mhm.
taking all of her skills from her. Instead, it was
Mhm.
like, well, just think about like how it's going to be, how much better it's going to be there in the future somewhere. And I think what that does is it not only it makes us feel very alone because then people aren't
Yes.
willing to like sit in the really hard stuff with us now, but
Yes.
it also almost like tries to invalidate how difficult it really is right now that she's not able to do those things. And so I guess what I want to offer to your listeners is that, yeah, like we might be looking ahead to even something like, I've got, a great vacation that's coming up, or I'm looking ahead to this promotion that's hopefully coming, or if someone's a student and they're really in slogging through like their thesis or whatever, and they're thinking about like how much better it's going to be there. if we are constantly living in a state of it's better there, out there, somewhere in the future ahead of
Mhm,
us, we
mhm,
are missing out on
mhm.
what it means to be human right now in this present moment. And we
Period.
cut ourselves off from feeling how hard it is right now. and
Yes.
and what I have come to experience and know so deeply in myself is that the more that I allow myself to feel to the edges of whatever it is that I'm feeling, the hard things, the edges of the hard things that I'm feeling, it only increases my capacity to feel to the edges of the amazing moments, the
Yes.
amazing moments, because
Yes.
our society and our world and our brains want to keep us at like this kind of very like neutral baseline without
Yes.
too much variability. And
Mhm.
that's not living. That's not living. We can feel to the edges of our joy. We can feel to the edges of our excitement about things. We can feel to the edges of our like the ecstatic e- awe in the moments. And we can feel to the edges of how grievous something feels or how angry we feel about something. And that is how we allow emotions to move through us.
Mhm.
That's how
Mhm.
we navigate really hard things.
Yes.
That's how we navigate things that we don't think that we could possibly ever deal with. Many people have said, I can't imagine losing a child. Well, neither could I. you know, but I
Period.
did. But I did.
Yes.
And I'm here to
Yeah.
tell you that when you allow yourself to feel everything that you're feeling, you will be okay. You'll be
Yes.
okay when this stuff
Yes.
comes. You'll be
I
okay.
love it. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. There were so many things in that sharing that resonated so deeply with me. The first being the present moment awareness. Like being present is essentially what we are being called to do. Yet
Mhm.
there's so much of our trauma, there's so much of our anxiety, there's so much of our shame that's blocking, that's disallowing that present moment being, that it's nearly impossible for us. And then we see it going as far back as to our children who are struggling now with ADD, ADHD,
Mm,
other learning disabilities. And it's really just a mind, a being that's so full of trauma. It's really hard to sit here and focus right now. I have a lot of shit on my consciousness, pretty much is what it
mm,
means, especially for young kids. And the next piece that really I really wanted to build on was about it just being hard. Like it's hard for us to be here present because of the traumas, because of the things that have been sometimes unconsciously programmed in our beings. Like I was saying, for me, my shame, I had so
mm,
much shame from such a young age. That what didn't come from me.
mhm,
That definitely came from generations and generations before me that I just inherited and was living in it as a child.
mm,
And what that blocks us from is the ability to experience what our Christian upbringing kind of lacked us in teaching, was that the heaven was meant to be experienced right here on earth. I
mm,
mean, Jesus even taught this and said these things. Yet for some reason we took on this notion, I don't know how it started or when it started, that heaven was some unattainable experience or place or pathway in this particular life. It was something that needed to be achieved or something that we had to wait for. When in reality, there couldn't be anything further from the truth, which is why we feel so disconnected, which is why we feel so unworthy, which is why we feel so unloved. If we only knew that even in the imperfections of death, the imperfections of illness, there is still perfection, there is still heaven in it. And this
mm,
is something I'm beginning to understand with my mother's journey. And I had this breakthrough fairly recently, just a few days ago, or a week ago, rather. And it was phenomenal for me because, like I had mentioned to you before, I was looking for a cure. And in many ways, still am a cure for dementia, a cure for this psychosis, a cure for this mental illness. When in reality, actually, there is pure perfection in how my mom exists now, today, because of the type of treatments that we're doing for her, the healing work that we're doing. We connect a lot in meditation. We connect a lot with
mm,
multidimensional beings. We connect a lot with higher dimensional beings. And had her consciousness been the way it was when she was in her previous form, there would be no way she could receive that light. There
Hmm.
would be no way she could receive that energy in her healing journey. Yet, because of her now condition, she is in a perfected state to receive God's pure divine sources, pure divine white light in full, uninterrupted. And so I literally was in tears. I was sobbing. I told you before, I was in tears before the weekend in LA.
Hmm.
Yet this experience in meditation with her showed me that, wow, my mom is now my teacher, even in her dementia state, because now she's a pure vessel for God. She has no resistance in
Hmm.
receiving that which is meant to be bestowed on her in the terms of energy and light and healing. And so I mean, I just want to place that on you, and even with your journey with Annie, that maybe it was in her state that she was in her most perfect form. Maybe the running, the jumping, the playing, the getting on your nerves, whatever,
Hmm.
children do. Maybe that wasn't her perfection. Maybe her perfection came in a different form. And so I just am so honored to be able to share in this space with you, because there's so much healing around how we were taught our heaven and on earth existence should be, and our heaven experience should be, that there's so much that we're relearning and
Hmm.
re-educating ourselves about, and able to reteach, and so that people can experience the present moment perfection of heaven here right now, you know.
Hmm. Hmm. I've often thought about Annie's body was, being damaged by this disease, but her, her soul, her innermost being is untouchable by disease and decay and death,
Yes,
because
yes,
there's no separation really in that sense from this life and the next.
yes,
And also, since time is inextricably married to matter, outside of this physical reality, time doesn't exist. And so there is
mm,
that part of ourselves that is timeless, that is eternal, that is always connected. And it's like learning how to listen, learning how to tap into that part of ourselves that is eternal, that
mhm,
is some of the work. It's sifting through, breaking the illusion of separateness is
yes.
what some of the work is. And I think that our souls wanted to experience the illusion of separateness,
Mhm,
that we wanted to experience what contrast feels like, that we wanted to experience emotion, because emotion only can happen in a physical body, because it is
mm,
vibrations in our body. And
mhm,
so I don't want to do anything that gets in the way of that desire of my soul to feel everything that I feel. It's like, why would I why would I take away that profound right and experience that my soul wants to have,
mm.
to feel everything that I'm feeling?
That part.
And I think one of the reasons why we have become very inept at feeling our feelings is like we walk around with these great little dopamine pills in our pockets called our
Yes.
our phones, our social media and all of that. And it not only makes us feel disconnected from each other, but it makes us feel disconnected from ourselves, because we get addicted to dopamine. We get addicted to the feel good stuff, and then we lose our ability to feel the bad stuff, or to feel the absence of that. And that really is like making us become less human, from
Yeah.
my perspective. And it's like I have to go through times, I'm just as guilty as anybody else, of like scrolling mindlessly for hours on social media,
Yeah, we
and
all
not
are doing
thinking
it.
about it. And I have to take breaks from social media, like force myself to not get on it, the whole day or something, which sometimes just feels like the worst thing. to spend 24 hours not on social media, but I have to like put those into my life, those breaks into my life, because then it like makes me reopen and reawaken to my lived experience now in this moment. That isn't just like little drips of dopamine, it's
Mhm,
like working harder for the dopamine in other ways and the connection
mhm,
in other ways.
mm. I really want to tap into something that you just were talking about and then kind of transition into a more kind of, I guess you could say, more business kind of
Mm,
conversation since it's the Meta Business Millennial podcast. But I want to tap into the part you were talking about in terms of why our souls came to this journey,
mm,
why we came on this ability or desire to be disconnected, to just reconnect in many
mm,
ways, or to be separate from, that's the word you use, to be separate, and also have the feelings. So we have to separate ourselves in order to feel what it's like to be disconnected in order to reconnect back to,
mm, mhm,
humanity. It's kind of like that process. And I know you're working on your podcast now, yet I would like for us to talk a little bit more about how this relates to us doing business, because I know you have a prolific career and a very intelligent woman. And what or how, if at all, has this experience of your soul journey and being separated to be reconnected informed your thinking about business or getting back into your business? Because for me, I was actually inspired to do meta business after losing both my father. I had a friend that was also murdered a few weeks after, actually,
mm,
ironically, in Jamaica, where I am right now.
mm,
And this has been a whole healing trip because I hadn't come here since her passing. And then, losing my mom in her traditional sense. And
mm,
so it really, I was separated enough where I realized that I had to connect back to myself and humanity in all that I did, especially in my work. Like
mm,
I couldn't show up anymore mindlessly doing tasks. Like there was no way. Like I might as well just die too. Like
mm.
that was my sense. And wanting to know, like, if you've had the chance to even start to imagine what this next phase of your career journey can look like, um, with Annie in her new form and your family in its new form. Like, how does that feel for you or look for you?
A lot of unknowns, a lot of unknowns. Like we talked about in the beginning, like death has a way of bringing a lot of clarity. And I think when I say that, what I immediately think is like long-term clarity, but that's not how this is fleshing out. What is
Hmm.
happening is that I have much more clarity about what I want my day-to-day to look like.
Hmm.
I have a lot more clarity about, really paying attention to what are the circumstances where I feel most alive? What types of people am I talking to that when I come away from those conversations, I feel excited about life, that I feel
Yes.
excited about the next chapter, that I feel that the possibilities are opening before me because of the types of conversations I'm having, because of the type of people that I'm, shoulder to shoulder with.
Hmm.
And that brings a lot of clarity around the things that I want to do, and not just what I want to do, but who I want to be in the world.
Mm.
So I think, in this space where we talk about self-development, self-improvement, embodiment, where we talk about tapping into your higher purpose, I think a lot of people who really thrive in a 9 to 5 think I need to quit and I need to go find or like become an entrepreneur, or I need to, like start this soulful business. And what I'm saying is you don't have to do that to feel really deeply in alignment with what you're doing. So
Agree.
entrepreneurship is not for everybody.
Agree.
Entrepreneurship, you have to be very risk tolerant. You have to have a lot of self-motivation. You have to be okay with many levels of, quote unquote failure and to be able to alchemize your failure into learning.
Yes.
And it takes a certain type of personality And I would even say, like, on a nervous system level, you have to do a lot of attentive work towards, working through like your limiting beliefs, and you have to be really attentive to what's happening on the inside so that you don't just completely implode your business. So it takes a certain type of person, I think, to be an entrepreneur. So what I'm suggesting is that people really just start to tune in more to that internal state where
Mhm.
you stop telling yourself things are fine when they're not. You
Yeah.
stop telling yourself, like, I just need to muscle through the next 10 years and I'll be able to retire, or the next 20 years and I'll be able to retire.
Uh,
Like this, that's no way to live. You just
right.
start being brutally honest with yourself about
Yeah.
how you're feeling about what's happening right now.
Mhm.
And then when we are honest with ourselves, that is when choice is introduced.
Yes.
Because when we feel like, well, this is just what I have to do, there's no choice in there, but you're also not being honest with yourself because there's always a choice.
Mhm.
Even I'll tie it back in a little bit more to my circumstances with Annie. I didn't choose for her to have this disease, but I chose to stick around, and because I could have put her up for adoption. I could have put her into the foster care system. I could have left. And none of those choices aligned with who I want to be in the world. But even just me acknowledging that I had the choice whether or not to be here was so empowering. It
Mhm.
brought so much clarification around how I wanted to show up to these difficult circumstances, how I wanted to show up in my motherhood. And it's the same way in our businesses, it's the same way in our employment, where when
Mhm.
we stop saying, I don't have a choice, because you really do. You really do have a choice, and you don't have to pay your taxes. That's a choice, but you might go to jail,
Period.
And
There's
it's yeah,
consequences.
exactly. There's consequences, but you always have a choice. You always have a choice. And
Absolutely.
the sooner that we will look honestly at our lives and decide what things we want to keep doing and the things that we want to change, even though it's going to require a lot of effort. There's so much freedom even just in that.
Yeah. Yes. I love all the things you said because for me, one thing that I felt was my hindrance was my inability to see clearly.
Mm,
I really felt like and I had to do a lot of healing around this, that confidence breeds clarity as well. So the more confident we are in ourselves, the more we're able to kind of see ourselves and see ourselves more clearly. I think that's such a beautiful statement that you made because being able to see ourselves through the lens of ourselves takes work too. For
mm,
me, I was such a people pleaser. I was such a, you know, even though I was a leader, I felt like I was more of a follower. I just
mm,
did what people told me to do very well. And so what we're asking people to do in terms of getting clear with themselves is being able to lead themselves, even
mm,
if that is in a corporate 9 to 5 job. And that's something that I don't believe many people are told to do or taught to do is even if I'm taking direction from someone, I still want to be able to have my own agency, my own voice, my own set of beliefs and values that I ascribe to. Yet in many ways we give all that away either as children or in exchange for a check or what we think to be comfort or safety in a scenario for a check. And so I really deeply resonate with that, call to action for folks, no matter where they are, to get clear with themselves, to feel into themselves and learn what those feelings are. Because for me, it took me having to do a very intentional Tai Chi practice for 2 years before I could even feel my organs. Like I was so numb. I would do all this tapping and exercising and never even feel like my stomach or my liver or my intestines.
mm,
And now, as soon as I feel a cramp or as soon as I feel something in my body, I'm able to know, oh, I know what that is. I'm
mm,
anxious, or, ooh, I know what that is. I'm not comfortable around this person. So now being able to feel into my body and listen to my emotions and get clear with who I am in a given moment, it's completely changed and shifted my life. So that's such beautiful advice. And, you know, I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but we're kind of already coming up on time. And I wanted to just allow you the space to really just share a little bit more about your podcast,
Hmm.
how people can tap in, and why it's really meaningful for humanity today, because I really admire what you're doing on your social media. You showing your mom belly, like you're really putting yourself out there. You laughing, but this is
Hmm.
real shit. Like people are not comfortable, myself included, with being real as fuck in a very public domain.
Hmm.
And you're doing it fearlessly, and I applaud you. So I just would love for you to share more with folks about how they can get more of that energy into their
Yeah, sure.
lives.
I will say that like being confident and courageous isn't about showing everybody everything all the time.
That
It's
part.
about being really clear about what you're trying to help other people with. So in the clarity of my values, in the clarity of what I want to encourage other people to do in their own lives, in one of my values of giving people permission to be exactly who they are, that brings a lot of clarity to the things that I talk about. It brings a
Hmm.
lot of clarity to the way that I show up on social media. It brings a lot of clarity to parts of myself that I'm willing to show. I believe it or not, I am a very private person. And so the things that I talk about are because I've thought about how I want to talk about them. And
Yes.
it's not so much that it's so that I can always show the shiny side. It's really more so about like just knowing who I am and knowing what I want my life to look like, and also thinking about like, okay, let's say that, tomorrow somehow I gained 1 million followers. What things have I put in place already to prepare myself for something like that? And
Mhm.
obviously, like, there are many things that would come with that I wouldn't be prepared for and I'd have to navigate. But I'm already thinking about like how am I talking about my children on social media? How am I
Mhm.
talking about myself on social media in these
Mhm.
places that, my existence lives forever on the internet? What kinds of things
Mhm.
am I saying? What
Mhm.
am I going to be able to back myself up? um and that brings a lot of clarity. And when it comes to like what I see for myself going forward, geez, I don't know, like I just closed my business to go back to school to study psychology and neuroscience because I'm very, very interested in how do we make positive lasting change in our lives. How do we change our minds? How do we change our habits? How do we change our relationships to bring more joy and satisfaction and fulfillment? So I'm talking about all of these things on my podcast, on the We Expire podcast, and also studying them myself. And I'm not totally sure what that's going to look like going forward. I do have a hunch that I will be working with people who are dealing with child loss, that are dealing with children with um that are medically complicated, and for rare diseases, because it's a different kind of sense when you get to talk to someone who knows what that's like to sit in the PICU with your kid.
Yes.
So I suspected that will be part of my work, but I don't really know. And
Mhm.
this is the beautiful thing about being really tapped into what's happening in the inside, is that it makes me feel very sure about the next step. Even if I can't see 2 miles ahead, I can,
Yes.
as I'm placing my foot in the next spot, I can feel, is this resonant with me? Does this feel in alignment with what I want to do? Does this feel good? Does this excite me? And if the answer is yes, then I'll take that step. And if
Yes.
not, then I'll step somewhere else. And
Come on
there's a lot of freedom and ease in that when you just become more and more at home in yourself,
Yes.
when you have the courage to just keep moving forward, even if you don't know what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. Feels good
Yes.
now.
Yes. That is so beautiful, because the part that resonates with me most deeply is getting yourself comfortable. You have a flow in this state of uncomfortableness, in this
Mm.
state of of the unknown, which we all exist in, and to be able to just use your own guidance system to take you from one step to the next step. Oh, is it solid ground?
Mm,
Yes. This one, nope. Okay, back here, and I love that image of you just kind of walking,
mm,
just step by step, just listening to your inner compass and your inner guidance. So
mm.
thank you so much for your time, and just really briefly just sharing like your Instagram handle, your podcast information, so folks can just follow you and stay in touch would be great.
Yeah. So Morgan_Motsinger on Instagram, and it's Motsinger like MOT and then singer like hallelujah, Motsinger. Morgan Motsinger. Again, the podcast is PS We Expire, and then my website is morganmotsinger.com.
Amazing, amazing. So thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of the Meta Business Millennial Podcast. I hope to see you on our next episode. In the meantime, I love you all so much. Peace. Did you really love this episode of the Meta Business Millennial Podcast? Well, I am honored, and I appreciate you subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. In the meantime, stay bright, my friends. Much love and light. Peace.